Buy my stuffed bunny. Please, Mommy's been hungry for 2 days. The bikers learned who took everything from her. The quiet afternoon exploded with the roar of motorcycle engines. Chrome glinted savagely in the sun as a group of leather-clad bikers rolled into the diner lot, their heavy boots scraping the asphalt as they dismounted. The air instantly thickened with exhaust and hot metal. Jack, the leader, adjusted his vest, his eyes scanning the area. But his gaze stopped abruptly. On the curb, an elderly woman with a messy bun sat hunched over, holding up a worn stuffed bunny. Beside her, a pale, thin little girl, no more than 4, clutched her mother's sleeve. "Buy my stuffed bunny, please." "The woman," Evelyn called out, her voice a desperate, trembling plea. "Mommy's been hungry for 2 days. We just need a little help." The bikers exchanged quick, hard glances. Most passers-by were looking away, quickening their steps. Jack stepped forward, his heavy boots loud on the concrete. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "Here, take it. Get her some food." Evelyn shrank back, eyes wide. "No, I can't take that much." "It's too much. Just the bunny. Please, take it," Jack insisted, pressing the money into her shaking hands. Just then, the convenience store door burst open. A red-faced man stormed out, rage twisting his features. "You can't be here," he shouted. "This is private property. I'll call the cops." The bikers turned as one. Sam cracked his knuckles, the sound sharp. "That's not gonna happen." The store owner planted his hands on his hips. "I mean it. You're threatening her in front of us?" Jack's voice was calm, a lethal edge beneath the surface. He took one step closer, and the owner's bravado shattered. "I'm not afraid of you." "Well, you should be." The silence stretched, cold and hard. The store owner swallowed, visibly shrinking, and backed away. "Fine," he spat, retreating into his store. As the bikers turned back to the stunned woman, a small, tiny hand grabbed Jack's leather sleeve. The little girl, Lily, whispered, her voice small and frightened. "Mommy says we can't go back to the shelter. She says they'll hurt us if we do." The innocent words landed like a blow. The bikers exchanged troubled, heavy glances, the weight of the girl's fear settling deep in their shoulders. Jack's weathered face instantly creased with genuine concern. "Ma'am, what's going on here? Why can't you go back to the shelter?" Evelyn's shoulders tensed as she pulled Lily closer, her eyes fixed on the cracked sidewalk. It's complicated," she whispered, barely audible. Sam, the tallest biker, crouched down despite his massive size, bringing his face level with hers. "We want to help. But we need to understand." Tears filled Evelyn's tired eyes. "They accused us of stealing food," she finally admitted, her voice cracking. "I swear I didn't take anything. They kicked us out, told us never to come back, said they'd call the police if we tried." Sam pressed gently. "Have you tried other shelters?" Evelyn let out a laugh that was a raw, bitter sob. "Word spreads fast. Once you're labeled a thief." She shook her head. "We've been turned away from 3 different places. Nobody wants to risk it. There's no one else," she whispered, clutching Lily. "It's just us. Has been for a long time." Jack stood, his jaw clenched, watching the child's terrible weariness. "Listen," he said finally, his voice firm and final. "I don't know exactly how yet, but we will." Doubt instantly clouded the flicker of hope in Evelyn's eyes. "Why would you help us? You don't even know us." "Because it's the right thing to do," Jack replied simply, "and because no one else seems to be doing it." The bikers exchanged a silent, meaningful communication born of years riding together, all nodding in agreement. "We need to figure some things out," Jack continued. "But we'll be back, I promise." As the bikers turned, their boots scuffing against the pavement, Evelyn remained on the curb, the $100 bill clenched in one hand, the worn stuffed bunny in the other. Lily's small hand found its way into hers, a gesture of comfort that broke Evelyn's heart. A mother shouldn't be comforted by her child. They were sitting on a cold curb, with nothing but a stranger's promise and a horrifying uncertainty hanging over them. The rumble of motorcycles faded into the distance as Jack led his crew to the Starlight Motel, a modest two-story building on the outskirts of town. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a soft blue glow across their weathered faces. Inside their shared room, the bikers gathered around a small table, their leather jackets draped over chairs. "This ain't right," Clyde said, running a hand through his hair. At 26, he was the youngest of the group, and his face showed the most distress. That little girl, she looked so scared. Jack pulled out his phone, his fingers tapping the screen with purpose. "There are 3 shelters in this area. One of them's gotta be where they stayed." Sam, quiet as always, sat on one of the beds and opened his laptop. "I'll check their websites, see what I can find about their policies." His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced ease. The room fell into a focused silence, broken only by the hum of the old air conditioner and the occasional rustling of paper as they made notes. Clyde paced back and forth, his restless energy filling the small space. "Got something," Jack announced after a while, pressing his phone to his ear. "Hello? Yes. I'm calling about a resident who might have stayed with you recently." His face fell as he listened. "I see. Thank you anyway." 3 more calls yielded similar results, polite but firm refusals to discuss any residents, past or present. Sam's web searches revealed little more than generic information about donation policies and volunteer opportunities. "We need to go there ourselves," Sam said finally, closing his laptop. "Talk to people face to face. Someone's bound to know something." Clyde stopped pacing. "What about Evelyn and Lily?" "We can't just leave them out there tonight." Jack's face hardened. "Sometimes helping means giving people space. We push too hard now. We might scare them away." He looked out the window at the darkening sky. "But first thing tomorrow, we're getting answers." Across town, in a small park nestled between old buildings, Evelyn sat on a wooden bench, her daughter curled against her side. She'd fashioned a makeshift blanket from her worn jacket, wrapping it carefully around Lily's thin shoulders. The streetlights cast long shadows across the grass, and a cool breeze rustled through the trees above them. Lily shifted in her sleep, her small hands clutching her mother's blouse. The stuffed bunny lay forgotten in Evelyn's lap, its button eyes reflecting the dim light. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she gently smoothed Lily's tangled hair, her touch as light as a feather. "Tomorrow, baby, tomorrow," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant sound of traffic. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but she forced herself to stay awake, watching over her sleeping child. The night stretched ahead of them, long and uncertain, but at least they were together. Lily's breathing was steady and deep, her face peaceful in sleep despite their harsh circumstances. Evelyn pulled her closer, trying to shield her from the night's chill. The park bench was hard and uncomfortable, but it was safer than returning to the shelter, where accusations and hostile faces waited. The morning sun cast long shadows across the worn brick building as 3 motorcycles pulled into the shelter's parking lot. Jack, Sam, and Clyde dismounted their bikes, their leather jackets creaking as they stretched. The shelter looked ordinary enough, a 3-story building with peeling paint and weathered windows. A small sign read, "Hope Harbor Shelter," in faded blue letters. "Remember," Jack said, adjusting his jacket, "we're just concerned citizens asking questions." They approached the entrance, boots crunching on loose gravel. A security camera tracked their movement, its red light blinking steadily. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of industrial cleaner filled their nostrils. At the front desk, a middle-aged woman eyed them nervously. "Can I help you?" "We'd like to speak with the manager," Jack said, keeping his voice level. Minutes later, Frank appeared, a stocky man with thinning hair and an ill-fitting suit. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Gentlemen, what can I do for you?" Jack stepped forward. "We're here about Evelyn and her daughter Lily. They were staying here until recently." Frank's expression hardened. "I'm sorry, but we don't discuss individual cases. Privacy concerns, you understand." "What about false accusations of theft?" Jack pressed, watching Frank's reaction carefully. Color rose in Frank's neck. "Sir, I don't know what you've heard, but—" "We heard plenty," Sam cut in, his arms crossed. "Including how they're now sleeping on park benches because of lies." Frank's facade cracked slightly. "Those weren't lies. We have strict policies about theft. If someone breaks our rules—" "Like the local store owner," Jack interrupted. "The one who tried hassling them yesterday?" Frank's eyes narrowed. "I don't see how that's relevant." "It's relevant because something doesn't add up," Jack said, taking a step closer. "A mother and her 4-year-old daughter accused of theft, with no evidence, no hearing, just thrown out on the street?" "You're overstepping!" Frank snapped, his friendly manner completely gone now. "This is private property, unless you have official business here." "We're making it our business," Clyde spoke up, his deep voice rumbling through the room. Frank backed away slightly. "I'm calling security, if you don't leave right now." Jack held up his hands in mock surrender. "No need. We were just asking questions." He turned to leave, but paused. "Interesting, though, how defensive you got about that store owner." Outside, the 3 bikers gathered by their motorcycles. The morning had grown warmer, but there was a chill in their conversation. "Did you see how he reacted when we mentioned the store?" Sam asked. Jack nodded, his jaw tight. "There's definitely a connection there. And did you notice? Not once did he ask about Evelyn and Lily's welfare. For someone running a shelter, he sure doesn't seem to care much about helping people," Clyde added, shaking his head. They stood in silence for a moment, watching as people came and went from the shelter. Some looked defeated, others hopeful, but all of them vulnerable. "We need more information," Jack said finally. "Frank's hiding something, but we can't help Evelyn without proof." Sam glanced back at the building. "So, what's our next move?" "We start digging," Jack replied, mounting his bike. "Something's rotten here, and we're going to find out what it is." The morning sun filtered through the coffee shop's windows, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Evelyn sat hunched over a steaming cup, her trembling hands wrapped around it for warmth. Lily dozed in the chair beside her, curled up with her stuffed bunny. Dark circles under Evelyn's eyes told the story of another sleepless night. Jack slid into the booth across from her, his weathered face creased with concern. Sam and Clyde took seats nearby, their presence creating a protective circle around the small family. "We visited the shelter yesterday," Jack said quietly, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Lily. "That manager, Frank, there's something not right about him." Evelyn's grip tightened on her cup. He's dangerous," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the clinking of cups and quiet chatter around them. "Not in the way most people think. He doesn't hit anyone or yell. He just destroys lives." "We need to confront him," Jack said, leaning forward. "With you there. If we can get him to slip up—" "No." The word burst from Evelyn's lips, sharp enough to make Lily stir. She lowered her voice again, shoulders trembling. "I can't go back there. You don't understand what it's like. The way he looks at you, like you're nothing. The way he can turn everyone against you with just a few words." Sam cleared his throat. "What about other people from the shelter? Someone must have seen something, known what was really going on." Evelyn's laugh was hollow. "Everyone's too scared. Most of them are like me. One wrong move away from losing everything. Frank knows that. He uses it. She took a shaky sip of coffee, her eyes distant. You don't know what it's like, living like this. Always moving, always running, never knowing if you'll have a bed tomorrow or food for your child. The shelters, they're supposed to help. But some of them, she shuddered, some of them make you feel even more worthless than being on the street. Jack exchanged glances with his fellow bikers. There has to be someone, a volunteer maybe? Someone who quit because they couldn't take it anymore? Frank makes sure everyone who leaves has something to lose, Evelyn said. He finds things out about people, keeps little secrets, uses them when he needs to. Lily stirred again, blinking sleepily. Evelyn's hand immediately went to her daughter's hair, stroking it gently. The gesture seemed to calm them both. Sam leaned forward, his usually quiet voice firm. What if we found some of the other people he's kicked out? There must be others like you. There are, Evelyn admitted. But they're scattered now. Some left town. Others, she swallowed hard. Some of them ended up in worse places than the shelter. Give us names, Jack pressed gently. Whatever you can remember. We'll track them down. Evelyn looked down at Lily, who had drifted back to sleep. Her face hardened, a quiet determination settling over her features. She sat up straighter, squaring her shoulders despite her exhaustion. I can't go back there, she said, her voice stronger now. But I need my daughter to be safe, and as long as Frank's in charge of that shelter, no one's safe. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Joe's diner, casting long shadows across the worn vinyl booths. Jack, Sam, and Clyde sat waiting, their leather jackets creaking as they shifted in their seats. The bell above the door chimed, and a petite woman in her 40s walked in, her eyes darting nervously around the restaurant. That must be Marcy, Jack said quietly, raising his hand to catch her attention. Marcy approached their booth hesitantly, wringing her hands. You're the ones who called about the shelter? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Please, have a seat, Sam said, sliding over to make room. Can we get you something to drink? Just water, Marcy replied, settling into the booth. Her shoulders were tense, and she kept glancing toward the door. A waitress brought over Marcy's water, and once she left, Jack leaned forward. We appreciate you meeting with us. We're trying to help someone who was kicked out of the shelter, Evelyn and her daughter Lily. Recognition flickered across Marcy's face. Oh, yes, I remember them. She took a sip of water, her hand trembling slightly. They were good people. Evelyn always helped in the kitchen, and Lily, such a sweet child. What can you tell us about Frank? Clyde asked, keeping his voice low. Marcy's face tightened. Frank, she shook her head. He's been running that shelter for 5 years now. At first, everything seemed fine, but then people started getting kicked out. Good people, like Evelyn, always with accusations of stealing or causing trouble. Is this a pattern? Jack pressed. Yes. Marcy nodded, looking down at her hands. But there's more. There's this volunteer, Sarah. She and Frank. They're always whispering together. And whenever someone gets kicked out, Sarah's usually involved somehow. Sam exchanged glances with Jack. Well, how so? She's usually the one who reports the supposed thefts. Marcy explained, her voice dropping even lower. But I've seen her. I've seen her going into the storage room late at night, when she thinks nobody's around. Have you told anyone about this? Clyde asked. Fear flashed across Marcy's face. I can't. Frank, he knows things about people. He threatened to tell my current employer about a mistake I made years ago if I ever spoke up. I could lose my job. My reputation. Her voice cracked. Jack reached across the table, not touching her but offering comfort through his presence. "We understand, but anything you can tell us might help." Marcy took a deep breath. "Sarah started volunteering about 3 years ago. Since then, at least 12 families have been kicked out. Always the same pattern. Accusations of theft. No evidence, just their word against Frank and Sarah's." The bikers absorbed this information in silence. Finally, Sam spoke up. "Is there any proof? Documentation? Witnesses?" "Frank keeps everything locked in his office," Marcy said. "But—" She stopped abruptly, fear crossing her face again. "I'm sorry. That's all I can say. I shouldn't even be here." She stood up quickly, gathering her purse. "Please don't contact me again. I'm sorry, but I can't help anymore." The bikers watched as Marcy hurried out of the diner, the bell jingling in her wake. They sat in silence for a moment, processing what they'd learned. "Well," Jack said finally, "looks like we need to take a closer look at Sarah." "And Frank's office," Sam added. Clyde nodded grimly. "Question is, how do we get proof?" The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the small park, where Evelyn and Lily sat huddled together on a worn wooden bench. Evelyn's hands trembled as she tried to smooth Lily's tangled hair, her own face pale and drawn. They'd been avoiding the main streets, staying hidden while waiting for news from the bikers. "Mommy, are you okay?" Lily's small voice quivered as she looked up at her mother. "You're shaking." Evelyn forced a weak smile. "I'm just a little tired, sweetheart." But her words came out slurred, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. She gripped the edge of the bench, trying to steady herself. "Maybe we should find Jack," Lily suggested, her eyes wide with worry. She clutched her stuffed bunny tighter, pressing it against her chest. "No, no, we need to wait here." Evelyn's voice trailed off as she tried to stand. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she crumpled to the ground like a marionette with cut strings. "Mommy!" Lily's scream pierced the quiet park. "Mommy, help! Someone help my mommy!" By chance, Jack and Sam were riding past the park on their motorcycles when they heard the child's desperate cries. They immediately pulled over, engines roaring to a stop as they rushed toward the sound. "Over here!" Lily waved frantically, tears streaming down her face. "Please help! Mommy won't wake up!" Jack reached them first, kneeling beside Evelyn's still form. Her skin was clammy and pale, her breathing shallow. Sam pulled out his phone, already dialing 911. "Evelyn, can you hear me?" Jack gently tapped her cheek, but she didn't respond. He turned to Lily, keeping his voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. "How long has your mom been feeling sick? She's been shaking all day," Lily whispered, clutching her bunny like a lifeline. She said she was just tired. The ambulance arrived within minutes, its sirens cutting through the peaceful park atmosphere. The paramedics worked quickly, checking Evelyn's vitals and loading her onto a stretcher. Jack lifted Lily onto his hip, following them to the ambulance. "I'm riding with them," he told Sam firmly. "Meet us at the hospital." At the emergency room, doctors immediately hooked Evelyn up to an IV. The diagnosis came quickly: severe dehydration and malnutrition, compounded by physical exhaustion. Her body had simply given out after weeks of inadequate food and rest. Lily sat in a chair next to her mother's hospital bed, her small hand wrapped around Evelyn's fingers. Jack stood by the door like a sentinel, his weathered face set in grim lines as he watched nurses come and go. "She needs complete bed rest," the doctor had told them, "and proper nutrition. Her body is severely depleted." The room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors and the soft whoosh of the air conditioning. Jack's fists clenched at his sides as he watched Evelyn's pale face, thinking about how things had gotten this bad. A mother and child, driven to such desperate circumstances that her body had literally given out from hunger and exhaustion. Sam and Clyde joined them, their usual boisterous demeanors subdued by the sterile hospital environment. They gathered near the door, exchanging worried glances as they took in Evelyn's frail form in the hospital bed. "She can't go on like this," Sam muttered, his voice rough with concern. Jack nodded, his jaw set with determination. His eyes never left Evelyn's unconscious form as he maintained his vigilant watch by the door. The fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor buzzed quietly as Jack paced back and forth. Through the window of Evelyn's room, he could see her sleeping form, finally getting the rest she desperately needed. Lily was curled up in a chair beside her mother's bed, clutching the worn stuffed bunny. "We need to move fast," Sam said, his voice low as he approached Jack. "The longer we wait, the more people Frank and Sarah can hurt." Jack nodded, pulling out his phone. He'd spent the morning making calls to former shelter residents, and the stories they'd heard made his blood boil. 3 other bikers joined them in the hallway, forming a tight circle. "I talked to a woman named Maria." One of the bikers, Pete, reported. "She said Sarah accused her of stealing food last month, got her kicked out with her 2 kids. Same story from the Jenkins family." Another biker added. "They saw Sarah loading boxes into her car late at night, but when they reported it to Frank, he threatened to call child services on them." Jack's jaw clenched. The pattern was becoming clear, but they needed someone willing to go on record. That's when Tom showed up, walking slowly down the hospital corridor. He was a thin man in his 50s, with tired eyes and weathered hands. "Thanks for coming," Jack said, shaking Tom's hand. Tom glanced nervously around before speaking. "I worked maintenance at the shelter for 6 months," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I saw things. Sarah, she's been stealing donations for months. Food, clothes, even cash donations." "Did you report it?" Sam asked. Tom's bitter laugh echoed in the hallway. "To who? Frank?" "He's in on it. Sarah keeps records of everything, dates, times, what was stolen, but she pins it on the residents. When anyone gets too noisy about it, they get accused of theft themselves." The bikers exchanged looks. This was exactly what had happened to Evelyn. "I've got proof," Tom continued, pulling out his phone. "Pictures. I took them when I was cleaning the office late one night. Sarah's notebook. It shows everything. Who she framed, when, what they supposedly stole. Evelyn's name is in there." Jack took the phone, studying the images. The evidence was clear as day. Dates, names, items stolen, all carefully documented in Sarah's neat handwriting. There was even a notation next to Evelyn's name. "Too observant. Needs to go." "This is it," Jack said, his voice hard with determination. "This is what we needed." The bikers quickly formed a plan. They would confront Frank and Sarah together, armed with Tom's evidence and the testimonies they'd gathered. The police would need to be involved this time. This wasn't just about one family anymore. "We'll need to move carefully," Sam cautioned. "Frank's got connections in town. We don't want him getting tipped off." Jack turned to look through the window again, watching Evelyn sleep. The steady rise and fall of her chest, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hand rested protectively near Lily even in sleep, it all reminded him why they were doing this. "We're doing this for her," Jack said firmly, his eyes never leaving the window. The other bikers nodded in agreement, understanding the weight of what lay ahead. Jack pulled into the shelter's parking lot, his motorcycle's engine growling to a stop. Behind him, the rest of the bikers lined up their bikes in a neat row. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement as they dismounted, their faces set with determination. "Remember," Jack said, adjusting his leather jacket, "we've got all the evidence. Don't let Frank twist this around." They walked through the shelter's front doors, boots heavy against the linoleum floor. The familiar smell of industrial cleaner filled the air. A few residents looked up from their seats in the common area, their eyes widening at the sight of the bikers. Frank stood behind the front desk, his face darkening as they approached. "What do you want now?" he demanded, straightening his tie. Jack placed a thick manila folder on the counter. "We need to talk, Frank. About Sarah, the missing donations, and all the people you've been throwing out to cover it up." Frank's face twitched. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do," Clyde said, stepping forward. "We've got statements from former residents, records of missing donations, even pictures of Sarah loading supplies into her car after hours." Sarah, who had been organizing files nearby, froze. Her hands trembled as she gripped a stack of papers. "This is ridiculous," Frank sputtered, his face reddening. "You can't just come in here making accusations." "We're not just making accusations," Jack interrupted, opening the folder. He spread out photographs across the counter, clear shots of Sarah carrying boxes to her car late at night. "Tom from maintenance took these. He's been watching for months." Sarah suddenly bolted for the back door. Clyde moved quickly, blocking her path. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. More shelter residents had gathered now, whispering among themselves. A few stepped forward, their voices growing stronger as they shared their own stories of missing items, false accusations, and Frank's threats. Frank's composure cracked. "You don't understand," he said, his voice dropping. "This shelter needs funding. The donations weren't enough. So you let Sarah steal them and frame innocent people?" Jack's voice was steel. "People like Evelyn and her little girl?" "I did what I had to do to keep this place running," Frank insisted, but his shoulders sagged. A woman from the crowd spoke up. "He threatened to report me to CPS if I said anything about the missing food," she said, her voice shaking. More voices joined in, a flood of accusations and stored-up grievances. Frank looked around wildly, seeing his control slipping away. "Fine," he spat finally. "I'll step down. But mark my words, none of you will find another shelter in this county. I've got friends in high places." "Those friends might not be so friendly when they see what we've got," Jack said, patting the folder. "Your choice, Frank. Step down quietly, or we take this to the police and the shelter board." Frank stared at them for a long moment, his jaw working. Finally, he reached for his keys and placed them on the counter. Without another word, he grabbed his coat and walked out, leaving Sarah standing there, tears streaming down her face. The bikers watched him go, victory in their expressions, but Jack's face remained serious. They'd won this battle, but he knew Evelyn and Lily weren't safe yet. There would be paperwork, investigations, and questions to answer. The road ahead was still long. The neon sign of the Paradise Motel buzzed and flickered as the bikers pulled into the parking lot. Their boots crunched on the gravel, the sound mixing with the hum of cicadas in the warm evening air. Jack's leather jacket creaked as he sat heavily on the bed in their shared room, running a weathered hand over his face. "That could have gone better," Sam muttered, leaning against the wall. His usual quiet demeanor was tinged with worry. Clyde paced the worn carpet, his massive frame casting long shadows in the dim light. "At least we got Frank to back down. That's something, right?" The sharp trill of Jack's phone cut through the tension. He answered, his expression darkening with each passing second. "Yeah, I understand. Thanks for the heads up, Tom." The other bikers watched as Jack slowly lowered the phone. "Sarah's made her move," he said, his voice tight. "She's gone to the cops, claiming we threatened her and Frank at the shelter. Says we're trying to intimidate them." "That's bull." Clyde's fist slammed against the wall, making the cheap artwork rattle. "We didn't touch anyone!" Sam shifted uneasily. "Doesn't matter what's true. It's their word against ours. And we don't exactly look like choir boys. Jack stood up, his jaw set. We're not backing down. Not now. Not when we're this close to helping Evelyn and Lily. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitors when they arrived. Evelyn lay in the bed, her face pale against the stark white sheets. Her eyes fluttered open as they entered, managing a weak smile. The nurses said, "You've been taking turns watching over us," she whispered. "Thank you." Lily sat in a chair next to the bed, clutching her stuffed bunny. Her small face lit up when she saw the bikers, but she didn't leave her mother's side. "How are you feeling?" Jack asked, pulling up a chair. "Better. The doctors say I can leave tomorrow." Evelyn's hands twisted in the sheets. "But there's something else." Her voice cracked slightly. "The social worker came by this morning." The bikers exchanged worried glances as Evelyn continued. They're saying I'm an unfit mother, that all this time in shelters not having a stable home." She swallowed hard. "They want to take Lily away." Lily pressed closer to her mother, her small fingers gripping Evelyn's hospital gown. The sight made Jack's chest tighten. "The state says I can't provide for her, that she deserves better than—" Evelyn's voice broke. "Better than me." Sam stepped forward, his usually quiet voice firm. "That's not happening. We won't let it. We've got proof now," Clyde added. "About Frank and Sarah, about how they forced you out. That has to count for something." Evelyn turned to look out the window, where the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Her reflection in the glass showed a face lined with exhaustion but filled with fierce determination. "I won't lose her," she said softly, pulling Lily closer. "I can't." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of a mother's love and desperation. The bikers stood in silent solidarity, knowing the real fight was just beginning. The courthouse loomed before them, its stone steps worn smooth by decades of footsteps. Evelyn's hands trembled as she straightened her borrowed blouse, the nicest clothes she'd worn in months, courtesy of a local charity. Lily clung to her mother's hand, her small fingers wrapped tightly around Evelyn's. Jack and the other bikers had traded their leather jackets for clean button-down shirts and slacks. They formed a protective circle around Evelyn and Lily as they climbed the courthouse steps. The morning sun cast long shadows across the entrance, and the air felt heavy with tension. Inside the courtroom, Evelyn sat rigidly in her chair, her back straight despite her exhaustion. The state's attorney, Miss Peterson, stood before the judge, her voice crisp and professional. "Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows that Miss Wright has failed to provide a stable environment for her daughter. In the past year alone, they've moved between 4 different shelters. There are documented accusations of theft." "Objections, Your Honor," Evelyn's court-appointed lawyer interrupted. "Those accusations were proven false." The judge nodded, making a note on his pad. "Continue, Miss Peterson." "The fact remains that this child has no permanent address, no consistent education, and her mother has no steady employment. The state believes placement in foster care would be in Lily's best interest." Evelyn's fingers dug into her palms, leaving half-moon marks in her skin. Lily sat beside her, unusually still, her eyes wide as she watched the adults decide her fate. When it was their turn to testify, Jack stepped forward first. His weathered face was solemn as he took the oath. "I've seen a lot in my life, Your Honor," Jack began, his voice steady. "But I've never seen anyone fight harder for their child than Evelyn Wright. She didn't choose to be homeless. She was wronged by people who should have helped her." One by one, the bikers testified. Sam spoke about finding Evelyn and Lily sleeping on park benches rather than return to an unsafe shelter. Clyde described how Evelyn had offered to sell her daughter's beloved stuffed bunny just to buy food while keeping Lily warm and protected. The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. When the last testimony concluded, he cleared his throat. "This is clearly a complex situation that requires careful consideration. I'm setting another hearing for 2 weeks from today. In the meantime, Miss Wright, you will retain custody of your daughter, but the state will be conducting regular welfare checks. Evelyn's shoulders sagged with temporary relief. Lily crawled into her lap, wrapping her small arms around her mother's neck. The courtroom slowly emptied, the sound of shuffling feet and murmured conversations filling the air. Outside, the afternoon sun had grown harsh, making everyone squint as they descended the courthouse steps. Jack's large hand came to rest on Evelyn's shoulder, warm and reassuring. "We'll fight this," he said firmly, his voice gruff with emotion. "We're not letting her go." Evelyn looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Lily held her mother's hand with one hand and clutched her stuffed bunny with the other, the toy that had come to symbolize their struggle and resilience. The group stood together on the courthouse steps. A strange family formed by circumstance and strengthened by adversity. The battle wasn't over, but for now, mother and daughter were still together, surrounded by unexpected guardians in leather and denim. The law office was small but tidy, with certificates hanging on pale green walls and the smell of fresh coffee in the air. Jack, Sam, and Clyde sat with Evelyn in worn leather chairs, while Sarah Mitchell, a seasoned family lawyer, reviewed their case files. "I'll take this pro bono," Sarah said, looking up from the papers spread across her desk. Her eyes were kind but serious behind wire-rimmed glasses. "But you need to understand what we're up against. The state doesn't back down easily in custody cases." Evelyn's hands trembled as she clutched her purse. "They can't take her. She's all I have." "The problem isn't just the shelter incident," Sarah explained, straightening a stack of documents. "They'll use your entire history of homelessness against you. Every shelter stay, every job change, every time you've had to move, they'll paint it as instability." Jack leaned forward, his leather jacket creaking. "But that's not fair. She did everything she could to protect her kid." "Fair doesn't always factor into these cases," Sarah replied. "We need to prove Evelyn is a capable mother despite her circumstances. We need character witnesses, documentation of her efforts to find work, proof that she's always put Lily first." Sam pulled out his phone. "We've got contacts all over town. People who've seen what Frank did at the shelter. They'll speak up." "Good," Sarah nodded. "We'll need written statements from anyone willing to testify. The more support we can show from the community, the better." Clyde spoke up, his voice unusually soft. "What about the folks who stayed at the shelter with them? They saw how Evelyn took care of Lily, even when things were rough." "Perfect," Sarah said. "Those testimonies will be crucial. We need to show the judge that Evelyn's circumstances were caused by external factors, not negligence." Evelyn wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I just need to keep Lily safe. I'll do whatever it takes." Her voice cracked slightly, but she held herself straight, dignity evident in every line of her body. "We'll start gathering statements today," Jack declared. "And we'll find those witnesses from the shelter." Sarah began writing on a legal pad. "I'll prepare the initial response to the state's petition. In the meantime, document everything. Every meal you provide for Lily, every doctor's appointment, every effort to secure housing. We need to show you're doing everything possible to create stability." The bikers exchanged determined looks. Sam was already making calls, while Clyde jotted down names of potential witnesses. "One more thing," Sarah added, her expression grave. "This process will be exhausting. The state's attorneys will dig deep, looking for any weakness. You'll need to stay strong." Evelyn squared her shoulders, though her eyes were tired. "I've been fighting my whole life. I won't stop now." As they prepared to leave the office, Jack turned to Sarah. "Whatever resources she needs, we'll provide them. The bikers have her back." "We don't stop until this is over," Jack said firmly to his fellow bikers, his voice carrying an edge of steel as they walked out of the lawyer's office. In the quiet of the motel room, Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, watching Lily sleep peacefully for the first time in days. The thin motel blanket rose and fell with her daughter's steady breathing. Even in sleep, Lily clutched her stuffed bunny close to her chest, its worn fur a testament to years of love and comfort. Sunlight filtered through the dusty curtains, casting long shadows across the worn carpet. Evelyn's fingers traced the edge of an old photo she kept in her wallet, a snapshot from happier times when Lily was just learning to walk. The memory of her daughter's first steps brought both joy and an ache to her heart. "My sweet girl," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted this life for you." The weight of their situation pressed down on her shoulders. She remembered the tiny apartment they'd once called home, before everything fell apart. The walls had been thin, the neighborhood rough, but it had been theirs. They'd had a routine then: breakfast at their small table, walks to the nearby park, bedtime stories under a star-shaped nightlight. Now, watching her daughter sleep in yet another temporary bed, Evelyn's chest tightened with fear. The thought of losing Lily made her physically ill. What would happen to her beautiful, resilient child in the system? Who would know that Lily needed her stuffed bunny to sleep? Who would understand that she liked her sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares? Outside, she could hear the low rumble of motorcycles as the bikers returned from their latest round of evidence gathering. Their presence had become a strange comfort. These rough-looking men with hearts of gold who'd chosen to fight for her and Lily. Through the thin walls, their muffled voices carried snippets of conversation. The hearing. "We need more witnesses. Can't let them take the kid." Evelyn closed her eyes, remembering the judge's stern face at their first hearing. The cold, clinical way they'd discussed her fitness as a mother. As if 4 years of sacrifice and love could be measured in shelter stays and bank statements. Her hands trembled as she tucked the photo back into her wallet. Standing up, she walked to the window and pulled back the curtain slightly. The parking lot was bathed in late afternoon light. The bikers gathered around their motorcycles, heads bent in serious discussion. Jack gestured Emp. The courthouse loomed before them, its stone facade cold and imposing in the morning light. Evelyn's hands trembled as she smoothed down her borrowed dress, the nicest thing she'd worn in months, courtesy of the bikers' generosity. Lily clung to her mother's hand, her small fingers wrapped tightly around the worn stuffed bunny. Jack and the other bikers formed a protective circle around them as they climbed the courthouse steps. Their leather jackets were replaced with clean button-down shirts and pressed pants, but their fierce determination remained unchanged. Inside the crowded courtroom, Evelyn's heart pounded as she took her seat beside her pro bono lawyer. The state's attorney sat across the aisle, surrounded by a stack of papers and wearing an expression of smug confidence. The judge entered, and everyone rose. As the proceedings began, the state's witnesses took turns painting their twisted picture of Evelyn. A parade of carefully coached testimonies described her as unstable, unreliable, and unfit to care for Lily. Miss Thompson was seen taking food donations, one witness claimed. She refused to follow shelter rules repeatedly. Evelyn's fingers dug into her palms, leaving half-moon marks as she fought to maintain her composure. Lily sat quietly beside her, eyes wide and confused. When Sarah took the stand, her perfectly pressed suit and practiced smile couldn't mask the malice in her eyes. "I personally witnessed Miss Thompson stealing supplies meant for other families," she testified smoothly. She would become aggressive when confronted about her behavior. The bikers bristled in their seats, but maintained their silence. They knew their turn was coming. One by one, they took the stand to defend Evelyn. They spoke of her dedication to Lily, how she'd rather go hungry herself than let her daughter miss a meal. They described finding her that day, offering to sell her daughter's beloved toy just to buy food. Finally, Jack stood to make his statement. His voice, usually gruff and commanding, carried a raw emotion that filled the courtroom. "Your Honor, "I've seen what real neglect looks like," he began, his hands gripping the podium. "I've seen parents who truly don't care about their kids. But Evelyn?" He paused, his eyes finding hers across the room. "This woman has fought harder than anyone I've ever met to keep her child safe and cared for." His voice cracked slightly as he continued. "I lost my own family years ago. I know what it means to have everything taken away. Evelyn doesn't deserve that fate. Neither does Lily. They deserve a chance, a real chance, to stay together and build a life." The judge's expression shifted, something in Jack's words clearly resonating. She studied the papers before her, then looked at Evelyn and Lily, really seeing them perhaps for the first time. "We'll take a 30-minute recess," she announced, rising from her seat. As they filed out of the courtroom, Evelyn pulled Lily close against her side. The little girl looked up at her mother, worry creasing her young face. "We're going to be okay," Evelyn whispered, though her voice quivered with uncertainty. The bikers gathered around them in the hallway, a wall of silent support as they waited for the hearing to resume. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the motel parking lot as Jack's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, recognizing Tom's number immediately. His heart skipped a beat. They hadn't heard from the former shelter resident since their initial conversation. "Tom? What's going on?" Jack's voice was tense, drawing the attention of Sam and Clyde, who were sitting nearby. "I've got something you need to see." Tom's voice crackled through the speaker. "Remember when I told you about Sarah? Well, I didn't tell you everything. I've been holding on to something big." Jack put the phone on speaker, and the other bikers leaned in closer. "What kind of something?" "Video footage," Tom whispered, his voice trembling. "From the shelter's security cameras, shows Sarah plain as day, stealing donations, setting up other residents, and Frank, he's in it too, helping her cover it up." The bikers exchanged stunned looks. Sam's hands clenched into fists, while Clyde let out a low whistle. "How did you get this?" Jack asked, his mind racing with possibilities. "I used to help maintain the security system," Tom explained. "Made a copy before I left. Been too scared to come forward until now, but seeing what they're doing to Evelyn and that little girl." His voice trailed off. Jack's heart pounded. This was exactly what they needed. Hard evidence that couldn't be denied or explained away. "Where can we meet?" They arranged to meet Tom at a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of town. The bikers arrived first, scanning the area carefully for any signs of trouble. Tom slipped in through the back door 20 minutes later, a small USB drive clutched in his trembling hand. "Here," he said, sliding it across the table. "Everything's on here. Multiple incidents, clear footage of Sarah taking things, Frank helping her dispose of evidence. There's even audio of them planning how to frame people." Jack picked up the drive, turning it over in his hands. Such a small thing, but it held the power to change everything. "You know what this means, Tom? This isn't just about clearing Evelyn anymore. This could bring down the whole operation." Tom nodded, his face pale. "I know. That's why I was scared to come forward. Frank has connections. Police, local, government. This could get ugly." Sam leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "We'll protect you. Tom, you did the right thing." They watched the footage right there in the coffee shop on Clyde's laptop. The evidence was undeniable. Crystal clear images of Sarah systematically stealing donations. Frank helping her doctor paperwork, both of them deliberately targeting residents who might cause trouble. "Look at the timestamp on this one," Clyde pointed. This was just 2 days before Evelyn got accused. The bikers copied the files multiple times, ensuring they had backups. They knew what they were holding wasn't just evidence. It was ammunition in a war they hadn't expected to fight. As they drove toward the courthouse, Jack clutched the USB drive in his pocket. The weight of it felt heavy, significant. In the rearview mirror, He could see Sam and Clyde following on their bikes, a protective convoy for this precious cargo that could change everything. The courtroom buzzed with nervous energy as Jack approached the judge's bench, a USB drive clutched in his weathered hand. His boots echoed against the polished floor, each step deliberate and firm. Behind him, Evelyn sat rigid in her chair, her fingers intertwined with Lily's smaller ones. "Your Honor," Jack's voice carried across the hushed room, "we have new evidence that directly relates to the credibility of the state's key witness." The judge adjusted her glasses, studying Jack with measured interest. "Approach the bench, please." As the judge reviewed the footage on her computer, the courtroom remained silent except for the soft whirring of the ceiling fans. Sarah, sitting on the prosecution side, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The state's attorney leaned forward, his expression growing more concerned with each passing moment. On the screen, clear security footage showed Sarah methodically removing boxes of donations from the shelter's storage room late at night. Another clip revealed her planting items in residents' belongings, including Evelyn's. The most damning footage showed Frank accepting an envelope from Sarah, then shredding documents while looking over his shoulder. The judge's face hardened as she watched. When she finally looked up, her eyes swept across the courtroom, settling first on Sarah, then on the state's attorney. "Counselor," she addressed the state's representative, "would you care to explain this?" The attorney stood, tugging at his collar. "Your Honor, we were unaware of this evidence. We request a brief recess to confer with our witness." "Denied," the judge's voice was sharp. "Miss Thompson," she addressed Sarah directly, "do you have anything to say about what I've just viewed?" Sarah's face had gone pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, looking desperately at her attorney. The judge continued, "The credibility of your testimony has been severely compromised. Additionally, this footage suggests criminal activity that will need to be addressed in a separate proceeding." She turned to the state's attorney. "Does the state wish to proceed with its case against Miss Walker's fitness as a mother?" The attorney stood again, deflated. "No, Your Honor. The state withdraws its petition." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Lily squeezed her hand tighter, not fully understanding but sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. The judge straightened in her chair, her voice clear and authoritative. "Based on the evidence presented and the state's withdrawal of their petition, I am dismissing this case. Miss Walker will retain full custody of her daughter." She paused, looking directly at Evelyn. "Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate investigation into the practices at the shelter, particularly regarding Mr. Frank Davidson and Miss Sarah Collins." The gavel struck with finality, and Evelyn's composure crumbled. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled Lily into her arms, holding her daughter close. Her shoulders shook, with silent sobs of relief. Years of fear and uncertainty finally releasing their grip on her heart. The bikers stood at the back of the courtroom, watching the scene unfold. Jack's face softened as he watched mother and daughter embrace. Sam placed a hand on his shoulder, and Clyde nodded silently, their usual tough exteriors giving way to gentle smiles. "Mommy?" Lily's voice carried across the now emptying courtroom. "Are we okay now?" "Yes, baby," Evelyn whispered through her tears, stroking her daughter's hair. "We're okay now." The morning sun filtered through dusty windows, casting warm patches of light across the worn carpet of Evelyn and Lily's new apartment. It wasn't much, just a small one-bedroom unit in a modest complex on the quieter side of town, but to Evelyn, it felt like a palace. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned the key in the lock, pushing open the door to reveal their new home. "Look, sweetheart," she whispered to Lily, who clung to her hand. "This is our place now." The rumble of motorcycles outside announced the arrival of their unlikely guardian angels. Jack, Sam, and Clyde appeared in the doorway, arms loaded with boxes and bags. They'd spent the previous day collecting donated furniture and supplies from community members who'd heard their story. "Where do you want this box, Evelyn?" Jack asked, holding up a container marked kitchen. "Over there, please," she pointed, still amazed by their continued presence in her life. The bikers moved with surprising gentleness, carefully arranging furniture and unpacking boxes. Sam assembled a small dining table while Clyde hung curtains that a local church group had donated. Lily stood in the middle of the living room, clutching her stuffed bunny, the same one Evelyn had tried to sell that fateful day. Her eyes were wide with wonder as she watched the room transform. "Mommy, is this really ours?" Evelyn knelt beside her daughter, pulling her close. "Yes, baby. This is our home, now." Throughout the morning, the apartment slowly came to life. The kitchen cabinets filled with dishes and groceries. A small bed with pink sheets was made up in the bedroom corner for Lily. Even the bathroom got a cheerful shower curtain with yellow ducks that made Lily giggle when she saw it. By afternoon, Evelyn was organizing the last of their belongings, while Lily played with some donated toys on the carpet. The manager at the local grocery store had offered Evelyn a job as a cashier. Not much, but it was a start. After everything that had happened at the shelter and the custody battle, this simple normalcy felt almost surreal. "You know," Jack said, pausing in the doorway as the bikers prepared to leave, "you've got our numbers if you need anything." "Anything at all." Evelyn nodded, fighting back tears. "I don't know how to thank you all." "Just take care of yourself and that little girl," Sam replied gruffly, though his eyes were kind. After the bikers left, Evelyn stood in the middle of their new living room, taking it all in. The walls needed paint, and the carpet was threadbare in spots. But none of that mattered. They were safe. They were home. Lily abandoned her toys and climbed onto the second-hand couch, patting the space beside her. Evelyn joined her daughter, and they sat together, hands clasped, watching the late afternoon sun paint shadows on their walls. Their walls. "We're going to be okay now, baby," Evelyn said softly, squeezing Lily's small hand. "We're going to be okay." The neon sign of Pete's Diner cast a warm glow through the window, illuminating the group gathered around the corner booth. Jack, Sam, and the other bikers had pushed 3 tables together to make room for everyone. Their leather jackets were draped over chairbacks, and the smell of coffee and fresh pie filled the air. Evelyn sat between Jack and Sam, looking more relaxed than they'd ever seen her. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, and there was color in her cheeks again. Lily, seated on a booster seat next to her mother, happily colored on a paper placemat with crayons provided by their waitress. "Pass the ketchup, would you?" Clyde called out, reaching across the table for his fries. The casual atmosphere was a far cry from the tension-filled days they'd endured during the custody battle. Jack cleared his throat, lifting his coffee mug. The conversations around the table quieted as everyone turned to look at him. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, his gruff voice carrying a warmth that made Evelyn smile. "To new beginnings, and to family the kind you choose." "Here, here." Sam raised his own mug, the others following suit. "You know," Sam added, setting his coffee down, "it wasn't just about helping her get her daughter back. It was about making sure she had a future." He glanced at Evelyn, who ducked her head, touched by his words. "Remember when we first saw you outside that store?" Clyde chuckled, shaking his head. "Who'd have thought we'd end up here?" "I certainly didn't," Evelyn admitted, her voice soft but steady. "I was so scared that day, desperate. I never imagined." She paused, looking around the table at the faces of these men who'd become her champions. "I never imagined I'd find a whole family." Lily looked up from her coloring, beaming at the bikers. "Uncle Jack, look!" She held up her drawing a row of stick figures on motorcycles, complete with leather jackets rendered in black crayon. Jack leaned over to examine the artwork, his usual stern expression melting into a genuine smile. "That's some fine work there, kiddo. You got my beard just right." The table erupted in laughter, and even the waitress couldn't help but smile as she refilled their coffee cups. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by the clink of silverware and the occasional burst of laughter. "You know what gets me?" Sam said, leaning back in his chair. "How sometimes the best things in life come from the hardest moments. Look at us now, we're sitting here like we've known each other forever." Evelyn reached for Lily's hand, squeezing it gently. "We have you all to thank for that. You didn't just help us survive, you helped us live again." The bikers exchanged glances, a moment of understanding passing between them. They'd started out trying to help a stranger in need, but somewhere along the way, they'd gained something precious themselves, the knowledge that even the toughest among them could make a difference in someone's life. As they finished their meal, the warmth of friendship filled the diner. They were more than just a group of bikers who'd helped a mother in need. They were family now, bound together by the journey they'd shared and the victory they'd won together. The evening sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. As the bikers filed out of the diner, Jack paused at his motorcycle, his weathered hands resting on the handlebars. The open road stretched before them like a ribbon of possibilities, disappearing into the horizon where the sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Sam adjusted his leather jacket, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know," he said, his voice quiet but carrying in the still evening air, "I never thought helping one person could change so much." Clyde nodded, leaning against his bike. "Did you see how Lily smiled today?" Actually smiled, not that scared little half-smile she used to give us. He shook his head, amazement clear in his expression. "And Evelyn, she stands taller now, like the weight of the world isn't crushing her anymore." Jack watched a pair of birds soar overhead, their wings catching the last rays of sunlight. "Sometimes the smallest acts create the biggest changes," he mused. "Evelyn's got her job now, her apartment. She's making it work. And she's good at it too," Sam added. "Heard from Mike at the store that she's one of his best employees, shows up early, stays late if needed. Lily's even started making friends at the park near their place." The sound of distant traffic mingled with the cooling ticks of their motorcycle engines. Jack pulled out his phone, showing the others a picture Evelyn had sent earlier that week, Lily at her new reading corner, surrounded by second-hand books they'd helped collect. "Remember how scared she was to take help at first?" Clyde asked, his voice soft with memory. "Now look at her. She's helping other women at the shelter, the new one, the good one, telling them her story, giving them hope." A gentle breeze carried the scent of summer flowers from a nearby garden. The bikers stood in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the journey that had brought them here. "You know what gets me?" Sam said finally. "We didn't just help Evelyn and Lily. We showed this whole town what happens when people stand up for what's right. Frank and Sarah can't hurt anyone else now." Jack straightened up, his eyes scanning the horizon. The familiar pull of the road tugged at him, but now it felt different. They weren't just riding to escape anymore, they were riding with purpose. "We did good," Jack said, his voice firm with conviction. He looked at his crew, these men who'd become more than just riding companions. "But the road's still out there. Let's keep riding, keep making things right." The others nodded, understanding passing between them without need for more words. They mounted their bikes, the engines roaring to life in a symphony of power and promise. The vibrations beneath them felt like a heartbeat, steady and strong. The sun dipped lower, painting their shadows long across the asphalt. One by one, they pulled out onto the open road, their bikes moving in perfect formation. Behind them, the town grew smaller in their mirrors, a place forever changed by their presence, just as they had been changed by their time there. The wind whipped past them as they rode, carrying them toward new horizons. Their tail lights glowed like red stars in the gathering dusk, growing fainter and fainter until they disappeared into the distance, leaving behind a legacy of hope and the promise of more good deeds to come. Sunlight streamed through the window of Evelyn's small apartment, casting a warm glow across the worn but clean carpet. 1 month had passed since the court ruling, and the space finally felt like home. Little touches here and there, a vase of wild flowers on the kitchen table, Lily's crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator, and the familiar scent of fresh coffee in the morning, had transformed the once empty rooms into their sanctuary. Evelyn stood at the kitchen counter, her hands trembling slightly as she held the letter from the community center. The paper was crisp and official, but the words were warm and welcoming. They were offering her a full-time position as an administrative assistant, with benefits and steady hours that would allow her to be home when Lily returned from school. "What's that, Mommy?" Lily asked from her spot at the table, where she was coloring with the new set of crayons the bikers had given her. "It's good news, sweetheart," Evelyn replied, her voice soft with wonder. She ran her fingers over the letterhead, still hardly believing it was real. The position had come through connections she'd made during her fight for custody. People who had seen her strength and determination, who believed in her ability to rebuild. Moving to the window, Evelyn gazed out at the city below. The street wasn't fancy, but it was alive with morning activity. People heading to work, children walking to school, shopkeepers opening their stores. It was a far cry from those desperate days when she and Lily had nowhere to go, when that park bench had been their only refuge. Her eyes fell on the stuffed bunny sitting on the windowsill. Its fur was still matted and worn, one ear slightly crooked from years of love and hard times. But now, instead of representing desperation, it had become something else entirely, a symbol of survival, of never giving up, of fighting against impossible odds. Evelyn picked up the bunny, feeling its familiar softness against her palms. "Thank you for everything," she whispered to it, remembering that day outside the store, when everything had changed. The bunny had been their last possession worth anything, but instead of marking the end, it had become their beginning. Lily wandered over, wrapping her small arms around Evelyn's waist. "Are you talking to Mr. Bunny again?" "Yes, baby," Evelyn smiled, running her fingers through her daughter's hair. "Just remembering how far we've come." Walking to the small fireplace that anchored their living room, Evelyn placed the bunny carefully on the mantel. It sat there proudly, a testament to their journey. The morning sun caught its glass eyes, making them sparkle as if alive with memories. Of the bikers who had stopped to help, of the community that had rallied around them, of the strength they had found within themselves. Evelyn turned to face Lily, who was watching her with those wise, understanding eyes that sometimes seemed too old for her young face. But there was something new in them now. Security, happiness, peace. The shadows of fear that had haunted them for so long were finally fading. "We did it, baby," Evelyn smiled, opening her arms. "We did it." The rumble of motorcycles echoed through the quiet neighborhood as Jack and his crew pulled up to Evelyn's apartment complex. The familiar sound brought a smile to Lily's face as she peered through the window, her small hand pressed against the glass. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the well-kept lawn, making the scene feel almost dreamlike. "Look, Mommy! They're back!" Lily called out, bouncing on her toes with excitement. Evelyn emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her face looked fuller now, healthier, and there was a quiet confidence in her movements that hadn't been there before. She opened the door before they could knock, greeting them with a warm smile. "Come in, please," she said, stepping aside to welcome them into her modest but tidy apartment. The bikers filed in, their leather jackets creaking as they moved. Jack's eyes swept the room, taking in the neat stack of books on the coffee table, the cheerful drawings pinned to the refrigerator, and the stuffed bunny sitting proudly on a shelf, no longer a symbol of desperation, but of survival. "The place looks great," Sam said, his gruff voice softening as Lily ran to give him a hug. Evelyn beamed with pride. "I've been working full-time at the community center now," she explained, gesturing for them to sit. "It's not much, but it's steady work, and they're good people." "More than good," Clyde added. "They're lucky to have you." Jack watched as Evelyn moved around the room, offering them coffee and cookies. There was an ease to her movements now, a certainty that came from knowing she was finally safe. She was no longer the frightened woman they'd found clutching a stuffed bunny on the street. "I can't thank you all enough," Evelyn said, her voice thick with emotion. "What you did for us." "You did it yourself," Jack interrupted gently. "We just gave you a chance." The room fell quiet for a moment, filled with the weight of shared memories and unspoken understanding. Lily crawled onto Jack's lap, showing him her latest drawings. Bright, happy pictures, full of flowers and sunshine, so different from the darkness they'd all faced together. "Actually," Evelyn said, standing up suddenly, "I have something for you." She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small wrapped package. Jack took it carefully, unwrapping it to reveal a framed photograph. His breath caught in his throat as he recognized the scene. It was from their first meeting, captured by a passing stranger. In the photo, Jack stood with his hand extended toward Evelyn, offering that first $100 bill, the moment that had changed everything. "How did you—" he started, his voice unusually rough. "Someone from the diner took it," Evelyn explained, tears welling in her eyes. "They sent it to me after everything was over. I thought you should have it." Jack stared at the photo, remembering the desperation in Evelyn's eyes that day, the way Lily had clung to her mother's sleeve. Looking at them now, he could hardly believe they were the same people. "Thank you," Evelyn whispered, her voice catching, "for everything." Jack looked up from the photo, his own eyes misty. "You're stronger than you think," he said softly, his words carrying the weight of everything they'd been through together. The morning sun painted streaks of pink and orange across the sky as Evelyn and Lily walked into the small diner where they'd first shared a meal with the bikers. The familiar smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, mixing with the soft chatter of early morning customers. Jack, Sam, and Clyde were already seated in their usual booth, their leather jackets draped over the backs of their chairs. When Lily spotted them, her face lit up with a smile that reached her eyes, something that had become more frequent these days. "Uncle Jack!" Lily called out, rushing toward the booth. Jack's weathered face softened as he scooped her up into a bear hug. "There's my favorite girl," he said, his voice gentle despite his rough appearance. Evelyn followed behind, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. The waitress brought over a stack of pancakes for Lily, who dug in eagerly while the adults shared knowing smiles. It was hard to believe this was the same fragile child they'd met just months ago. "The community center job is working out great," Evelyn said, wrapping her hands around a warm coffee mug. "They even offered me health insurance starting next month." Her voice carried a note of pride that hadn't been there before. Sam nodded approvingly. "You deserve it, Evelyn. You've worked hard to get here." "I wouldn't be here without all of you," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. She reached for the brown package and slid it across the table. "I wanted you to have this before you go." Jack carefully unwrapped it to reveal a framed photograph, the moment they'd first met outside the convenience store. Someone had captured the image of Jack handing Evelyn the $100 bill while Lily clutched her stuffed bunny nearby. "How did you—" Jack started, his voice trailing off. "The store's security camera," Evelyn explained. "The new owner helped me get a copy. I wanted you to remember where it all began." Clyde cleared his throat, clearly moved by the gesture. "We've got something for you, too." He pulled out a piece of paper with phone numbers and addresses written in neat rows. "No matter where we are, you can reach us, day or night. We're family now," Sam added firmly. "That means you're never alone again." Lily looked up from her pancakes, syrup dripping from her chin. "Promise you'll visit?" "Wild horses couldn't keep us away, kiddo," Jack assured her, ruffling her hair. As they finished their breakfast, the conversation flowed easily between them. They talked about Lily's upcoming school enrollment, Evelyn's plans to take some night classes, and the bikers' next destination. But beneath the casual chat ran a current of deep connection, the kind that only forms when people have fought battles together. Finally, it was time. They gathered in the parking lot, where the motorcycles gleamed in the morning light. Evelyn hugged each of the bikers in turn, whispering thank yous that carried the weight of everything they'd been through together. "You take care of your mama, okay?" Jack said to Lily, who nodded solemnly before throwing her arms around his neck. The bikers mounted their motorcycles, the engines roaring to life. Jack turned to Evelyn one last time. "Remember what I said. You're stronger than you think." Evelyn and Lily stood hand in hand, watching as their unlikely family rode away. The rising sun cast long shadows behind the motorcycles as they disappeared down the road, heading toward their next adventure. But this time, both the bikers and Evelyn knew that distance wouldn't matter. Some bonds couldn't be broken by miles or time. The roar of engines filled the morning air as the bikers pulled away from the small town that had become more than just another stop on their endless journey. Jack led the pack, his leather jacket catching the early sunlight, while Sam and Clyde flanked him on either side. The familiar vibration of their motorcycles beneath them felt different somehow, lighter, as if the weight of their mission had lifted with their success. As they hit the highway, Jack couldn't help but think about Evelyn's face when they'd said goodbye, the woman they'd first met, desperate and afraid on that curb with a stuffed bunny in her hands, had transformed into someone strong and hopeful. Her eyes now held a quiet confidence that spoke of battles won and storms weathered. Sam pulled up alongside Jack, shouting over the wind, "You thinking about them too?" Jack nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He remembered how Lily had hugged each of them goodbye, no longer the frightened child they'd first encountered, but a little girl with a future ahead of her. The landscape rushed past them, fields giving way to forests, small towns blending into bigger cities. But none of these places held quite the same meaning as the town they'd left behind. That's where they'd found more than just another person to help. They'd found a reminder of why they chose this life in the first place. Clyde signaled for them to pull over at a scenic overlook. As they killed their engines, the sudden silence felt heavy with meaning. "You know," Clyde said, removing his helmet, "I've been riding with you guys for years, but this one felt different." Jack nodded, running a hand through his wind-swept hair. "Because it was different. We didn't just help someone out of a tight spot. We helped rebuild a life." He paused, looking out over the valley below. "We helped give a mother and daughter their future back." The morning sun climbed higher as they stood there, each lost in their own thoughts. Sam pulled out his phone, looking at the photo Evelyn had given them. A simple snapshot of all of them together outside her new apartment. "Remember how scared she was to trust us at first?" he asked, passing the phone around. "Can't blame her," Jack replied, his voice gruff with emotion. World hadn't given her much reason to trust anyone, but she did, and look what happened. They mounted their bikes again, the engines rumbling to life beneath them. The open road stretched out before them, endless and inviting. As they rode, each town they passed through reminded them that there were probably other Evelyns out there, other people fighting battles that seemed too big to face alone. The highway carried them further and further from the town where they'd made such a difference. Their leather jackets caught the wind, and the sun warmed their backs as they rode. They might be leaving, but they knew they'd carried something valuable with them. The knowledge that sometimes the toughest-looking people could have the softest hearts, and that family wasn't always about blood. The horizon swallowed them up as they rode on, their bikes growing smaller and smaller against the vast landscape. They were moving on to whatever waited for them next, but they carried with them the certainty that their work mattered, that one person's life changed could change the world in its own small way. The morning sun filtered through the diner's windows, casting warm patches of light across the worn leather seats. The familiar rumble of motorcycles outside had already drawn the usual curious glances from other customers, but today was different. Today, the tough-looking bikers weren't alone. Evelyn pushed open the glass door, her steps confident and steady, so different from the desperate woman they'd met months ago. Lily bounced alongside her, clutching her beloved stuffed bunny, her cheeks rosy and full. The transformation in both of them was striking. "Look who's here!" Jack stood up, his weathered face breaking into a broad smile. The other bikers, Sam, Clyde, and the rest, turned with matching grins as Evelyn and Lily approached their regular booth. "You look amazing," Sam said, pulling out a chair for Evelyn. She did look different. Her clothes were clean and neat, her hair styled, and most notably, her eyes sparkled with life. "It's all thanks to you guys," Evelyn said, settling into the seat. Lily climbed up next to her, no longer the shy, frightened child they'd first met. "I can't believe how much has changed." "Tell us everything," Jack encouraged, waving over a waitress to take their order. Evelyn's face lit up as she shared her news. "The community center job is perfect. They've even promoted me to program coordinator." She squeezed Lily's shoulder. "And this little one started kindergarten last month. I got a gold star on my drawing," Lily announced proudly, pulling a slightly crumpled paper from her small backpack. The bikers leaned in to admire her artwork, their tough expressions softening. "We have our own place now," Evelyn continued, her voice steady and sure. "It's small, but it's ours. No more shelters, no more running." She paused, emotion catching in her throat. "No more fear." Jack reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You did all the hard work, Evelyn. We just gave you a chance." "You gave us more than that," she replied softly. "You gave us hope when nobody else would." The waitress arrived with plates of pancakes, and Lily dug in eagerly. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and stories. Evelyn shared tales from her job, where she now helped other struggling families find their footing. Lily chatted about her new friends at school and her favorite teacher. As they finished their meal, Evelyn pulled out a small envelope. "I wanted you to have these," she said, sliding it across the table. Inside were photos. Lily on her first day of school, their new apartment, Evelyn at work. Simple moments that meant everything. "Look at you two," Clyde said, his voice gruff with emotion. "All settled in and proper." The bikers exchanged glances, remembering the desperate woman and child they'd found that day, selling a stuffed bunny just to survive. Now, watching Evelyn and Lily together, strong and happy, they knew they'd been part of something special. When it was time to leave, Evelyn hugged each of them tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Lily waved goodbye, her stuffed bunny tucked safely under her arm. The bikers watched through the diner window as mother and daughter walked down the sunny street together, their steps light and unhurried. They were home at last.